天天在一起，天天用心听，听见台北的声音。FM 93.1，幸福永远属于你。
公民总主笔，
方恩格时间。
谁当家？
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 你当家？
谁当家？
谁当家？
谁当家？我当家。你当家？我当家。到底谁当家？你来当家。
Program on Taipei Broadcasting Station. I'm your host, Ross Darrell Feingold. Today, our very special guest is Ambassador. May I call you Ambassador? Because, sure. You know, once you're an ambassador, you're always an ambassador. Yeah. Of Ambassador Leonard Zhao, who is a retired diplomat serving the Republic of China and was ambassador to what was then known as Swaziland, among his many other illustrious posts in his career. Ambassador, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Ross. It's my pleasure to be here.
Before we talk about your career as a diplomat and being posted all over the world, which sounds very exciting, and working in the presidential office as well, tell us a bit about your childhood. Where did you grow up?
Well, I was born and raised in Kaohsiung, in the southern port city. My late father, he was a lifelong, employee of the Kaohsiung Port Authority. So I grew up in Kaohsiung, until after I graduated from senior high school, Kaohsiung Zhongxue, that I came to Taipei for my college education.
Now, in the time I've been in Taipei, of course, Taipei has changed a lot, but in recent years, Kaohsiung has changed a lot too. It's also more and more of a, just like another big city. Anywhere else in Asia, it feels like. Well, what's it like for you when you visit Kaohsiung? And you think back, to your childhood versus Kaohsiung today.
Well, it's funny you should mention that because, as a matter of fact, I feel a little ashamed that I'm getting less familiar, with my hometown, Kaohsiung City, because I spent my childhood and brought up there. But after I went to Taida, and then ever since I've been living and studying and later working most of the time in Taipei, except for some very some short break. I went down to Kaohsiung to visit my folks, and for that kind of trips, I spent only 2 or 3 days in Kaohsiung. Then I rushed back to Taipei. So later, that I was in overseas, so that gave me even a less chance and the time to go back to my hometown. So what I was asked many years ago, interestingly, I was asked, by a media friend. So what's the city you feel most familiar with when you're looking back? Well, I said, that's a good question. Probably I will answer, you never guessed, Washington, D.C.
I had a feeling you were going to say that.
So I'm less familiar, with Kaohsiung than with Taipei. Taipei now, I'm fairly, familiar, because for the past few years I've been living and working in Taipei. But Kaohsiung, yeah, you're right, it changed, dramatically. So I feel like a stranger, when I was there.
You mentioned that you studied Taida. You graduated from the Department of Law at Taida, where a lot of prominent people in Taiwan, business, politics, have graduated from. Do you have any inside stories about some famous classmates when you were there?
Well, yeah, whenever you you mentioned about Taida Faluqi, these days in Taiwan, in Taipei particularly, they were kind of try to make fun of your the alma mater, because of all the past 3 consecutive presidents of the Republic of China. They're all graduates of Taida Law School. Well, among them, I can tell you honestly, Ross, Chen Shui-bian was my classmate, and Ma Ying-jeou, my senior classmate, and Tsai Ing-wen, my junior one. So that was I should be proud of them to be holding such a prominent places in the Taiwanese government. I just I wish them good luck.
No, I was hoping you would say like, Chen Shui-bian was really good at one class but bad at another. Ma Ying-jeou was good at something, and Tsai Ing-wen, she got a really good grade. I thought you'd give us some inside information about your classmates.
Well, to begin with, I have to say they're all working very hard when they were in school. Okay, in Taida, Chen Shui-bian is very hardworking one, and I recall that he worked his way up to be admitted to the bar exam, which was very tough. Those days, the passage rate 0.1% passage rate, so which is a very very highly difficult one. But he got it passed in the third year, sophomore in Taida, and Ma Ying-jeou, of course. Ma Ying-jeou has been very very prominent, attending a lot of campus activities. Like one of the 社团领袖. Okay, he was a student leader, not only of Taida but also of the whole country as well. And Tsai Ing-wen is another example. Tsai Ing-wen, I don't think she was interested in the politics in those days. I think I was told that she was very hardworking, and she, after graduation from NTU, she went to U.S. for advanced for a graduate study, and later she got another degree from LSE in the UK. So I must say that, to be fair with them, they're all very hardworking. So I think they deserve what they have got.
That was a very diplomatic answer, which brings me to my next question, Ambassador. Why did you choose to change that path, right? So you're studying in the law department at Taida, but then you chose to pursue a career in diplomacy. Why did you make that choice?
Well, Ross, it's an interesting question. As a matter of fact, to become a diplomat has never, one of my choice when I graduated from NTU. But it was my favorite job when I was elementary school. During my childhood, I envied those great diplomats in ancient times of Chinese history, such as Yan Ying, Lin Xiangru, later in the Qing dynasty, Zheng Jizhe. I think your China heads, those names. So I was admirer of those great diplomatic figures in our history, and for what they have done, what they have achieved. And later I changed my my interest. Then there was a time in a senior high I wanted to become a correspondent. I was immersed in some media, journalism, and also there was a time I wanted to become a movie director. So very very kind of changeable, because I had to try different type of career choice, career paths, and personal hobbies. So well, then when I upon graduation from NTU, that was accidental, so I think and life is full of unexpected. Someone said that it's like a script pre-written. You simply don't know what's going to happen to you. Again, if I quote a famous line in the movies of the Forrest Gump, what Forrest Gump say, Tom Hanks, he mentioned in the movie that life is like, I don't want to imitate his accent. Life is like a box of chocolate. You never know what you're going to get. So that's what happened to me. Originally, I can tell you honestly, shortly after my graduation and when I finished my Army service, which is compulsory, I wanted to pursue law school study in the U.S. And fortunately, I was admitted to NYU Law School, NYU. Very lucky, I was very, very lucky. But, there was no scholarship. My late father, he wanted to to spend his lifelong savings, the house, okay, 贷款, a loan, get a loan for my study. I didn't want to do that. I simply cannot tolerate. So I decided to hang on, hang in Taiwan for another while. Then I got a chance to. I was told that the law school graduate can also qualify to take the foreign service examination. Then I did. Okay, I'm trying to make a long story short. I was very to my surprise, I passed the ROC's diplomats exam, examination, entry exam. That I passed at the first place, and so I think maybe that's kind of my kind of job. Maybe that's the Lord's calling for me to be here. So I spent 6 months. When you are admitted, when you pass the entry exam, you have to go through the FSI training for 6 months. That I did. Also, again, at the top rating when I graduated from the FSI. So I think maybe I was stuck to this job. So I belong to this. So that's what happened. I don't know if it's my luck or but I learned, and I learned from my job there, and over the past quite a few years, and I have to, looking back, I have to be grateful to my former boss and to my former colleagues and co-workers for that.
Was it unusual among your classmates from the law department to choose different career paths, or almost everyone became a lawyer, or in the case of people like Chen Shui-bian, Mike Joe, they also became politicians, which is not unusual for lawyers. Right. But what about some of your other classmates? Were they saying to you, Leonard, you could be a brilliant lawyer. Why do you want to be a diplomat?
Well, when I studied in the Taida Law School, my specific interest in the law study was I was interested in American American common law, American way of legal system, such as jury system. I like the way you were standing in front of the jurors, trying to claim for your client's interest, to have the justice served. I think this kind of mandate, this kind of ambition, comes from my childhood experience. After I finished reading the autobiography Abraham Lincoln, I admire how he upheld to serve the justice for his neighbors and free of charge, no lawyer's fee. So with that kind of a dream, I wanted to become a lawyer, but practicing law in the United States. Okay, become maybe not a trial, but later I was told it's impossible. Less likely that you're going to practice law in the U.S. unless you're working in the immigration law firm. So you have to come back. So, but in the Taiwan, we serve the continental system. So law school graduates, those classmates of mine, most of them, they end up, for the become a prosecutor, or trial lawyer, or some, judge. But we have two departments of Taida Law School. One is a so-called legal theory, and the other one is a judicial, practice. I think the latter part, that departments graduates mostly end up in the law, in the court and the law firm. But my own department, 法学组, for legal theory, they were quite diverse, result. Some became a banker, some became a financial businessman, and some mentor. So it's quite diverse. But I was a one of the very rare graduates end up to become a diplomat.
Let's talk about something else very rare that you did, because I find this part of, or this stop in your career, very fascinating. You helped set up the TECRO in Canada.
That's right.
What was it like setting up a new office for Taiwan, a new representative office, where they didn't have this before, and now you're the first group of colleagues to go from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and do it? What was that like?
Canada, and Taiwan used to have diplomatic ties until the year 1971. when they broke up. And I think you know that. And ever since, Taiwan did not have any kind of of any nature with Canada. And this kind of a lack of contact lasted until after Tiananmen Square incident in the 1989. So Canada, this country, was one of the first in the Western world, which just realized that the China they have recognized diplomatically, maybe it has been disappointment, to them because of the Tiananmen Square incident, and so but the other part of the of the Chinese nation, Taiwan, Republic of China, they might deserve their real attention, because I think that's one reason. The other one is that they like to have some trade relations, the commercial benefits that call for their interest, because Taiwan then has been one of the four little tigers of Asia, and the air links between the two countries. That was it's a lot of economic interest. So Canada took the initiative to approach Taiwan for some talk, negotiation, for a kind of a new relation to be established between two countries. At the beginning, this kind of talk was held, you can imagine, confidentially in a third country. I can tell you now, it's not a secret anymore. That was held in Tokyo, Japan. So 2 rounds of talks over. After that, they then so we reached the consensus agreement that we agreed to exchange our office between our two sides. Canada has already had a quasi liaison office in Taipei, and then Taiwan has not yet. So Canada invited us to set up office in Canada. That became a reality. This kind of agreement has to be realized, become a reality. So the year is 1991. I think 2 years after 1989. So 1991, we were invited to set up office in Canada, but nothing to do with me. Canada suggested, politely though, we set up an office in Toronto.
Not in the capital.
Not in the capital, because to avoid some political sensitivity, because they try to play safe, be careful to avoid as much the Chinese protest objection as possible. So we said, why don't you set up office to begin with in Toronto, geographically not far away from Ottawa? Then they can see how it works, and then we moved back to Ottawa. So 91, we had a senior official to be in Toronto. A year later, 1992, Canadian a senior official, I think number 2 minister of their international trade, he was in Taiwan for a free visit. And then he brought a message, said, now time is ripe for you to send someone to Ottawa, set up in the office.
Now, separate from any political issues, what were the logistical issues that you encountered just setting up an office?
Well, of course, it's a lot of things I was required to do or not to do. First, you have to be discreet. The Chinese embassy has been there in Ottawa for so many years. So I was told that before my arrival, the Chinese ambassador, a senior diplomat from PRC, he has been warning to those people in the city, say that Taiwan is going to set up office in Ottawa later on, but it's just a trade office, not that important. And then the guy who was being charged is a young guy. He doesn't have any power or influence, So don't pay too much attention to the new Taiwan office. It's just a very small trade office. So I sense that the political, sensitivity. So ever since I got there, I landed my foot in Ottawa. I kept telling myself, I will not say or do anything which will be interpreted as a confrontation against the PRC embassy there. And secondly, which be interpreted as an embarrassment to my counterparts in the Canadian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I was there to make friends, as many as possible. I was there to be a Taiwan, a salesman, Taiwan's representative. I didn't want to play up those kind of parties, or is counterproductive. So when I was interviewed shortly after my arrival, when I was interviewed by the leading newspaper in Ottawa, an Ottawa Citizen, it's like Washington Post of Washington D.C. This lady asked me, "What are you here to push for some diplomatic recognition?" I said, "No, it's not what I'm here for. I'm here simply to pursue, to explore what can be what is the area we both Canadian people and Taiwanese can benefit from." I think I'm here to make friends, to pursue some common interest between our two peoples. I'm not here to make troubles, to give anyone a hard time. But anyway, so it went well. Looking back, I feel very grateful to those Canadians, for their friendship and help. So I enjoy my work with Canadian government, and also even the PRC embassy. I rarely said publicly any bad words about the PRC embassy people. So once, it's interestingly, 人民日报, People's Daily News, a young guy who came to my office, to my surprise, and he didn't mind the overseas flag, hanging in my office. He came in, 听说你的水平很高. I was surprised. How come 人民日报 came to me? That was against our policy. I never wanted to take initiative to approach those any media from mainland China, from PRC. But he came to my office. 听说你的水平很高. I said, "Oh, 谁跟你讲的?" I said, "No, 我们大使馆的人说的." Well, I said, I don't know how to respond that. So I feel content. I feel grateful. But that was thank God's help. I survived.
Did headquarters here in Taipei, did they always understand the challenges that you encounter just by being new? I mean, for example, were they able to pay you on time, or do they understand how to send money to Canada? Like,
that was I think have you heard the expression? A canary in a tunnel, just an experiment. So I was the first. I was first ever in the history. I was the first ROC official to be accepted or to be invited to be seen in Ottawa. Ottawa, Canada, they are very, very, straightforward. And when they recognized China, they treated Taiwanese officials in a very, strict, very rigid, manner. As you can, I was understanding. But when they were very, kind of pissed off by what happened in Tiananmen Square, they feel sympathetic toward Taiwan. But still, there's some middle ground, some gray area. I have to try to work on the fine line. I never want to go beyond that to make to make them feel comfortable with with my work there.
Okay, we're going to take a short break, but then when we come back, we'll talk about some of your other interesting postings during your diplomatic career. You're listening to Residence Messenger on Taipei Broadcasting Station. We'll be right back.
有长照服务需求、长照特别扣除额问题，请拨打1966长照专线，5分钟内通话免付费。一通电话让长期照顾管理专员协助申请长期照顾服务及解答长期照顾特别扣除额相关问题。以上内容由台北市政府卫生局提供。
爸爸应酬不开车，黄色嘟嘟安全多，应酬喝酒不过量，安全回家最上道。爸爸要平安回家哦。
喝酒不开车，开车不喝酒哦。让我们一起尊重生命，拥抱亲情。
亲爱的民众，提醒您定期清除排油烟机内部油垢。烹煮食物时，切忌分心做其他事情，并注意人离火熄。且厨房附近应设置灭火器，操作时保持适当距离。当厨房火灾时，严禁以水灭火。油锅起火也千万不要移动油锅，以免翻覆造成火势扩大延烧。以上内容由台北市政府消防局提供。
亲爱的朋友，您还在吸烟吗？快拿着健保卡到戒烟门诊或拨打戒烟专线0800636363。提醒您，最近兴起的电子烟、加热烟，因为没有浓浓的烟臭味，就被认为无害。其实已经证实，新兴烟品都有二手烟及三手烟的危害，甚至还有爆炸的风险。我是义工蔡依林，所有烟品都 get out。我拒烟，我骄傲。
教育部提醒大家，开学防疫不松懈，请家长每日量孩子体温，如有发烧请就医，并在家休息。上课时要全程佩戴口罩，采固定座位、固定成员。使用空调时保持通风良好。用餐时采个人套餐，使用隔板或维持社交距离，不并桌、不交谈。校园防疫不松懈，安心学习有保障。以上广告由教育部提供。
大家好，我是奥运举重国手郭幸存。举重不是硬碰硬，而是找对方法去面对它，就跟防疫一样。面对疫情，我们可以扎稳基本功，勤洗手、戴口罩，维持社交距离。面对未知，我们可以谨慎以对，主动查证讯息，避免恐慌。让我们团结抗疫，一起为台湾拿下防疫金牌。台湾加油！
有政府，请安心。以上广告由行政院与机关署提供。
谁当家？
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 你当家？
谁当家？
谁当家？谁当家？
谁当家？我当家。你当家？我当家。
我当家。
到底谁当家？你来当家。
Welcome back to Residence Messenger. Our guest today is Ambassador Leonard Zhao Jialin. We were talking about your overseas posting to Canada, and you were also posted for many years in Washington, D.C., which you said was the city you feel most at home in. Your responsibilities there included at different times dealing with members of Congress and also dealing with political parties. Now, I know you worked really hard, but it also sounds like you had a chance to attend a lot of social events or political party conventions and things like that. Tell us about the social side, not the serious side.
Well, okay, I was posted in Washington, D.C. twice, for 2 tours. The first one was back in 1980s, from 82 through 86. And the second tour, until maybe almost nearly 10 years later, I returned to Washington, serving there for my second tour from 1996 to 2000. So for these 2 tours, I was very lucky. When I back to my, in my first tour, 4 years, 82 through 86, I was only a junior officer, handling the political affairs, political contact with the State Department officials. And that was a very, very tough time because, as you can imagine, from 82, that was shortly after the diplomatic breakup between U.S. and Taiwan, which was in 1979. So those are kind of dark days, because you can imagine, shortly after the diplomatic relations established between China and U.S., consider PRC like the honeymoon, period, and Taiwan like an outcast. But you try to work something out of the almost nothing. That was very good training, very tough. So unfortunately, I did accomplish something during my first tour. For example, although a junior officer like I was, I managed to become a friend of some senior level officials. As a third secretary, per se, 三等秘书, the bottom level, then I managed to befriend 2 or 3 assistant secretary of Asian Pacific Affairs in the State Department, which according to my boss then, Fred Chen, 前副, okay, that was unprecedented, big deal. Because and then particularly when Taiwan did not have any diplomatic ties with U.S., so then I accomplished something to make my boss feel satisfied and pleased. That's my first tour, only State Department contact. But second tour, when I returned in 1996, first I was in charge of the political session, where I used to be as a junior officer, but then I became the head person of the political session. I recall that when David Dean, the AIT chairman then, he was so kind to give me a welcome reception near the AIT. He said, "Oh, Leonard, welcome back." And then he introduced some of my former state, counterparts. Almost 10 years later, and some of my, say, "Leonard, do you remember me? Like such and such." I said, "Of course." And David Dean, so I say this certain gentleman from the state. When I left, he was a deputy, a director, deputy director of a certain office. But when I returned, nearly 10 years later, he was promoted to deputy assistant level. I say, David said, "Hey, I said, "Of course." We hug. "Oh, Leonard, you remember me?" Blah blah. So that was a very warm moment, and then. They call me, "Leonard, your promotion, you got promoted, so I call you Mr. Director, blah, blah, something." No, I said, "Don't call me that way. You call me what? Recycled Washingtonian." Recycled. So, and then, only 2 or 3 months later, to my surprise, because then I was, as a political session head, our congressional liaison office had another colleague who was transferred back to Taiwan, to MOFA. Then, when I was wondering who's going to be the new head of the congressional lead office, suddenly they say, "Well, the words from Taipei say, I will be transferred to a congressional." So I served in political session only for 2 or 3 months. Then I was transferred to congressional, serving there until 3-some years later when I finished my second tour in Washington. So for the second tour, you're right. I covered both political session and congressional liaison office. In other words, I was very honored to be able to know the both ends of the Pennsylvania Avenue, as the words say that, both ends. And looking back, I got to know some good friends from the in the State Department and also in both parties, Republican Party and Democratic Party. And then I got to know some friends from the Capitol Hill. For those counterparts and friends I got to work with, to serve. If my memory serves me right, I particularly remember some very interesting, very unforgettable counterparts. But I would like to single out, one example. Because of the time constraint, only one example, which my conversation with him is simply unforgettable. As you can imagine, as my audience, all the audience can imagine, for those days, first 1990s, my second tour. Now, all of my counterparts must have been retired by now. or maybe they have not around, but not so. But all of my former counterparts, except one, this gentleman, he not only hasn't he retired, now he's even reached the very top of the American political hierarchy. Joe Biden. I was, when I had a conversation, I got to converse with Joe Biden. Very, very, just a pure luck, because Joe Biden was serving as the Senate Foreign Relations Committee chairman. Was a very, very heavyweight senator. It's unapproachable. But fortunately, I got to know his chief of staff. So one day, I was in his chief of staff's office for a conversation, for a chat, and suddenly Joe Biden walked in, and then he we stood up. His chief of staff, Frank Januzzi, Italian gentleman, he stood up. He said, and Frank said to Joe, "This is Mr. Zhao from Taiwan office," and I was of course in awe of Joe Biden. I did not expect to meet such a person in front of me. He always trying to make conversation. He said to, how's it going between you and China? Well, it's a very, it's a predictable question. Yeah. I say, well, can I say that, Senator, you have 3 hours? Let's talk about this from the Civil War, between Mao Zedong and Chiang Kai-shek. No, there's no way for me to do that. I say, well, but I hate to waste such a precious time by giving him make a good impression on him. But with such a short period, I don't want to waste his time. I said, Senator, you have time for a joke? Okay? Well, thanks to my education, I got some American sense of, sense of humor. I said, well, you have time for a joke? Yeah, sure. Who doesn't like jokes? Okay. I say, okay. I said, old ladies are window shopping in a ceramic store. And one says to the other, oh dear, I like this china so much that I would like to have 2 of them. Okay. Then Joe Biden, he laughed. Okay, to China. He laughed. Then I follow up. I say, Senator, what goes best? What goes best with a beige tablecloth? Beige tablecloth. 什么跟米色的桌巾最搭? Okay. He said, what? I say, the answer is red china. 红色的瓷器跟米色桌巾最搭. So these two, just a short, kind of a riddle or joke. I finished that. I said, let's talking to Senator. Okay, you have a nice day. Then I was, I was out of there. Next day, I called Frank. I said, well, I hope I did not, take too much time of your boss yesterday. He said, no, okay. Joe found your joke very amusing. So I was very, very, very fortunate. I was very happy with this kind of just one example. But some other, even the State Department, although my colleagues in MOFA, they keep saying that, beware of the state people. They are very, very rigid, very square. They don't, the Capitol Hill people, they can be very flexible personality, but not State Department. I heard that, but for still, I got to make some very good friends from the State Department. So even, including Richard Bush and Douglas Paul and Stephen Young. And all of them, they are very kind to give me some, short words of recommendation for my book published last year. So I always, remember their friendships.
Speaking of presidents, when you came back to Taipei, you worked in the presidential office. Now, for those of us not so familiar with what goes on inside the presidential office, how did your work there differ than what people do in MOFA? What were you doing in the presidential office, even though you were from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs?
Yeah, there are two extremely kinds of political culture. In MOFA ministry, I think all of my boss and my colleagues, they have been well trained through a very long stretch of time. So MOFA is very, very, they have some form to follow, some protocol to follow. There's a very rare chance you can go beyond that. How to deal with your boss, deal with your foreign guests, the diplomatic protocol. But in the 总统府, foreign office, And then that was when the KMT lost the presidential election. So when I was invited to work in 总统府, that's when Abian was the president. Why did I go there? Because of Abian's invitation. I said most of my boss in MOFA, they know that. I was, as a matter of fact, I was reluctant to accept his invitation in the first place. I think I have mentioned about that in my book. Abian, already, he asked me to see him in his presidential office in late 2000. And when I heard of his invitation, I declined twice, because originally I got already got an offer in MOFA, serving as a 调法师师长. And I said, well, you don't need to give me a job because I already got a job there. Abian said, no, that was it's a low rank, but in 总统府it's a high rank. And second, I said, I knew very little about the Taiwanese politics. I was overseas, for diplomatic service. I say, not worry, the colleagues in 总统府, they will help you. So he's right. My former colleagues in the 总统府, even now we still keep in touch. And my former deputy, who called me earlier today for some other things, and my former secretary, special assistant, he has been in close contact with me. So I developed some friendship with some new friends. And now some of them still, having contact with me over Facebook or the Instagram. So, 总统府, different culture. You have to be flexible. You have to, adapt to a new kind of, ambience. Like, because, in 总统府, you can imagine, I was serving in the DEG, First Bureau. DEG was responsible for some international and mainland China affairs. So that gave me a chance to continue my my former diplomatic career background. And also another job for DEG is serving as the English language paperwork and speech contest, speech test and the drafting for president. That was an English language. I used to serve as an English interpreter to Li Denghui, before. So I was not unfamiliar with the kind of language, documents. So I work with those my colleagues in DEG, all right. But some other, outside DEG, some other colleagues in the 总统府, they're from different background. Some maybe political background, maybe speaking not English, even not Mandarin. Maybe Taiwanese. Hey, 搞造, hey, 搞造. Something like that. Fortunately, I can speak some Taiwanese dialect. So it's a learning process. You have to manage. You have to manage to develop, to work with this different kind of people. I think that comes to my diplomatic service itself. When you serve in the U.S., working with Americans, and when you're in Ottawa with the Canadians, different kind of people, different kind of culture. But later in Swaziland, it's an African culture, extremely another, like day and night. So, but that gave me a chance to on-job training. But I enjoyed doing that.
Yeah, later on you were ambassador to Swaziland, and we get a lot of negative impressions, I think, about Swaziland here in Taiwan or in other parts of the world, because it's a unique, to be fair, they have their unique culture. What's one thing you would like people to know, people here in Taipei to know about Swaziland, or now as they call it, Eswatini?
Yeah, Eswatini. I have to invite my friends to understand one thing. Eswatini is one of the very few living the so-called monarchies in the world. I think we can count no more than 5 fingers. Monarchies around the world: Japan, the UK, Thailand. Okay, but most of the current monarchies in the world, they are ceremonial ones. Eswatini is one of the exceptional case, which is not a ceremonial. It's a absolute monarchy. In other words, the king, he is not a ceremonial leader of the kingdom. He has the power not like the Queen of UK, not like the King of Thailand, where they have prime ministers. But in Swaziland, the king is a power source, is a policy maker. Also, he's a personnel, a selector, creator. He handpicked the prime minister, not through the parliamentary election, not like those cabinet system. The handpicked, he handpicked the prime minister, handpicked all the ministers. So, frankly speaking, Eswatini is hardly a democracy by Western standard these days, because of the tradition. It's not created, invented by the current, the king. That came from his late father. The late king set up the system, and then he simply followed that, inherited from this kind of. So it's a monarchy, and also he has many wives, but doesn't mean that he's very some personal passion for many wives. It's simply a tradition coming from his late father. So we have to be understanding with Eswatini to respect this culture and respect the unique system. Although this kind of a system, this culture, is not been very popular to the Western media, but since our diplomatic ally, and now it's the only one in Africa, we have to be understanding, to be respectful, and with this such a interesting, unique culture and monarchy.
Well, we're almost out of time, but one more question before we go, because you've worked in the presidential office and at MOFA and overseas, and next week is going to be the National Day. Yeah, as a diplomat, what memories does the Shuang Shijie bring back, whether overseas or in Taipei?
Well, I think all the people at my age, we grew up in Taiwan, and we've been through the education in the elementary school, in the high school, junior high. We have been taught about how great, how moving the birth of the first republic in Asia, has been. We have been so familiar with such names as Sun Yat-sen, Huang Huagang Lie Shi. And though I recall, a couple of years ago, I got a chance to visit Guangzhou because of my business interest, nothing to do with politics. But especially, I asked my host in Guangzhou to arrange a special trip for me to visit two spots. One is Huangpu Junxiao, and one is Huang Huagang Lie Shi. And those are a part of the Republic of China's recent history. You may not like it, okay? You may not agree with them, what happened, but you cannot forget them. You have to live with this is a part of our history. Now it's changed. The whole world situation is different from what it was. The World War II, for example, during World War II, Germany is the most notorious, horrible country in Europe. And now Germany is the leader, one of the leading countries in Europe. So look what it changes. So we have to live with the current reality. But still the memory, the past, we have to be, we have to keep in mind in the past, what happened in the past, and then we can work on what happened is now. And then we can have a good view, good, perspective for what will happen in the future. That's how I feel.
Well, once again, said very diplomatically, Ambassador Leonard Zhao. The book is called by Yishou Huaipai Da Hao. Excellent book about the career of a diplomat serving Taiwan. Ambassador Zhao, thank you again for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you, Ross.
You've been listening to Residence Messenger on Taipei Broadcasting Station.